So yes, we're talking about working with a creativity coach versus self-coaching. There are definite advantages and disadvantages to both. If you work with a creativity coach, for example, you work with me, I will give you a series of exercises designed to help you overcome whatever your issue is. For example, I recently worked with a woman in Maine who, her main issue was time. She's a mother of 4, she's a substitute teacher, a freelance writer, a mixed media artist, she does extreme couponing, and she was trying to figure out how to find time to fit fiction writing in the mix. Well, in the midst of working with her, she also was going through some medical tests and was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. I can help her work around the time issues. I do not feel like I am qualified to help her work around the medical issues. So we discussed that, and she decided that we would no longer continue our work. And that was honestly expected. I figured that would be her decision. There's another woman down in Texas, and her issue, she said, was procrastination. Okay, I am, or I have been in the past, the procrastination queen. I can find anything, everything to use as an excuse not to do what I need to do. And I know that I'm doing this when I do it. So we worked with her about, her main issue was she gave priority to the things that she scheduled. That makes sense. We all understand the importance of keeping appointments that we write down in a calendar. So she started making an appointment with herself before her husband got up, and she made progress. She said, yes, I still procrastinate, but I know what I'm doing and I make myself stop. And that's a pretty big accomplishment. So one advantage to working with a creativity coach is that you are kind of almost forced to look at yourself, look at your life, and figure out what your challenges are and how you can overcome those. You can do the same with self-coaching, and in fact there are several books that help you with this. Julia Cameron has several, including The Artist's Way, Walking in This World, and there's a new one that I heard about, but I can't remember the name of it. And then Eric Maisel is a creativity coach based in California, and he has a book out called Coaching the Artist Within. And his emphasis is, one of his emphases is that if you're a writer, you're still an artist, because you're creating new, for example, new worlds of science fiction or new material, regardless of what you write. What I would like to do, I don't want this to be just me standing up here talking, because, you know, I could talk all day and you guys would get tired of hearing me. So what I would like to know is, what are some of your tried and true techniques for self-coaching to get yourself out of a rut and into doing, for example, to get yourself out of watching TV and onto writing?
I use the TV for company, so if I have something else I need to do, I put it on something that's a rerun I've seen 6 times already. So it's there and it's company, and I'm vaguely aware of what's going on, but I'm not going to sit there and watch it because I've already seen it so many times.
I understand that.
Unless it's like The Day After Tomorrow about the Ice Age coming back, I've watched that like 32 times, so I will watch that one.
I'm a list maker. I make lists of things that, like when I first get up, when I'm sipping my coffee, of things that I just need to get done. And I follow that list. And at the same time, when I'm doing that, I've always promised myself to give myself a little me time, but I limit that.
Okay,
As I'm getting
so
those
not
things done.
only do you do your list, but you incorporate a little reward into that.
Yes, right.
Okay, and then I agree with what you say about turning the TV on to reruns, except for NCIS. I can't do that.
I like to listen to music, and I used to like to take my dog for a walk. Like if I got something on the tip of my tongue and I can't think of it, then I'll distract myself so that it frees up that part of my brain and I can think of it.
Okay, so that not only ties into avoiding some procrastination, but also how to work around some potential blocks.
Right.
And in fact, Ken's list does the same thing.
Yeah.
Because if you have your list of what you need to do, you're less likely to encounter a block or a rut.
That worked. That worked for me one time. I couldn't think of the word kabuki, and I was trying to think of kabuki dance.
You use it all the time, right?
Recently, we've been reorganizing our house and the trailer we have in our studio and sewing studio into like stations, kind of what they teach for grade school children.
Interesting.
I have a very small house that, the footprint is like 16 by 16. My house would fit inside this room. It does have a greenhouse attached to it, and we have an upstairs, which is the bedroom. But I have the freezer, the wood stove, one set of shelves, the sink, a little bit of counter, the cook stove. We added a pantry, and then stairs. And so there's just not a whole lot of room in that little thing. So I've been doing some sculpture lessons. So I have those sitting kind of over in one corner by the sewing machine, and then book stuff it gets moved around whenever I'm tracing on artwork I'm tracing has a spot on the wall. And working it in stations makes it real easy to go, oh, I want to do that. So I grab the clay and I do a little bit of that, and then I set it aside to dry and I go do something else.
Mm-hmm. And yes, are you?
I don't have a television and I don't listen to music, but my tendency is to rehearse in my mind what I'm going to do very well, so that when I do it, I do it. I don't have to do any planning or thinking about it when I'm doing it. I simply go over. The time I would be, I'm sorry to say, wasting with television and other stimuli, I simply go over and engineer it in my mind before I say do it.
Okay. That's a good point too, with creative visualization. And for some people it works better than others. For me, if I do any kind of visualization, I think about how it feels or how it sounds. Because with my eyesight, I'm legally blind, so there's a lot of things I don't see. For example, on that back wall between the two windows, I do know there is a picture. I assume it's nautical, but I can't really tell from here. So, unless I were to walk back to the table and stand by Rick, that's all I can tell you about that picture. So visualization doesn't work well for me if we're talking only vision. But that's one good thing about it, is because you have to find what works for you, whether that's in visualization or in creativity in general. And I am a firm believer in that, because if I were to say, okay, everybody, you have to make a list. You have to make a list. I'm not a list maker. Do you think that would work for me? I don't know if Nina's a list maker or not. But I kind of have a feeling that it wouldn't really work all that well for her if she was told that that was the way it had to be done. Because you have to have leeway. You have to allow for people's individuality. You have to allow for creativity.
I'm back here inside going,
Because, in all honesty, and if you work with a creativity coach, any at all, they'll tell you that too. You have to find what works for you. Because, a doctor can write a prescription. For example, he gives my nephew amoxicillin for a strep throat infection. Okay, so that worked for him very well. His sister, the doctor writes her another prescription for a smaller dose, of course, because she's 7 years younger. He gives her a prescription for amoxicillin, and it doesn't work at all. So he gives her K-Flex. Now, if he had been one of those, oh, this has to work for everybody takes the same thing. Which, I mean, okay, first of all, what kind of doctor would do that? But second of all, he understands people are individual and the same thing does not work for everybody. Was that clear as mud?
no, that was a good analogy because there are some people who are allergic to those antibiotics. And
Uh-huh.
some people, your creativity will wither and die if you try to force yourself to write within the parameters of you're supposed to have this many chapters and you're supposed to have this many words in that chapter. And no, sometimes it doesn't work that way.
But that's an interesting thing though, because there's points where you have to force yourself. You have to. I mean, even it's like procrastination. You can, set up a ritual or a time where I like to have a nice cup of coffee or something and sit down and usually the same time. But there's times when you feel you cannot, there's just nothing there. But I always force it.
See, that works for you.
Well,
But
it
it will
doesn't
not
work.
work.
It doesn't work. But see, what it's telling myself is I'm not giving up, and it doesn't work. It's total crap sometimes.
And see, that's another thing. You can use the same you can do the same ritual every day for 5 years. You wake up the next morning and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
I've been there.
I was taught to do like run self-inventories of how efficient is this working for me? If this isn't working for me, what do I need to change to achieve
Yeah.
the goal?
But see,
But
that's
I'm here and there's my goal. What do I have to do to get there? I
But
don't
that's just
care
it.
what is.
Because whenever you're doing the same ritual every day for 5 years, and it's working for you, and it's not exactly waning, so you don't know it's going to stop working, and then the next day you wake up and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then what do you do?
Well, sometimes something will click. If you don't give up, if you keep going, even something eventually clicks. You don't know when it's going to happen or if it's going to happen. And then sometimes you just have to get up and walk around, walk outside, do something,
Mhm.
call somebody. But you don't give up.
In her book, The Right to Write, Julia Cameron says it's called when you look at all of the work you've done over your lifetime, it's your body of work. And she said it's called a body of work for a reason, because you have to have some kind of movement, some kind of forward movement, or you'll stagnate, or you'll move backwards. And she said so to use that as a literal concept whenever you're stuck and you feel like you're about to stagnate or you feel like you're going to move backwards, get up, go outside and literally take a walk. Move. Get your body moving so your body of work can move forward also. And that was an interesting concept. She said she came up with it. She decided that had to be for certain whenever she was on a retreat in Taos, I guess that's how you say it, Taos, New Mexico. So, even she advocates that sometimes you have to change things up.
I don't know if any of you've read the book Rituals. It's like little short subjects of different artists, writers, musicians, scientists even, and it's like their daily rituals, how they did things. And I was amazed when I read through that, how many of them took long walks every day. I mean, that and too much drinking seem to be the
That's what I was talking about when I mentioned walking the dog. Get out, move. And one thing to do is add to your tools that work for you and just keep building your toolbox.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's funny that you say a toolbox because I have an article that I used to apply for a writing job a few years ago. I didn't get it, but it's still a good article. And it's what's in your creativity toolbox.
There you go. Yeah.
So I may have to dig that up and share it if anyone would be interested in seeing it.
I would be.
You know, kind of talking about the diversity of the ways you can do stuff, because I totally agree with the concept that authors are artists,
Mhm.
because you are crafting words, and those words have meanings, and those meanings provoke thought. Just like if you go and look at paintings in a museum, you see those colors, those images, it provokes thoughts and feelings and emotions, so it's still art.
Mhm.
So even though we have the science fiction novel and all that's going on in it, we also do artwork related to that story, you know, and it just carries from one place to the other. And I watch movies and stuff, and I'm going, wow, that's just like in, you know,
Mhm.
so-and-so in our book.
Right.
I've got a book called Word Painting, and
Oh, that sounds interesting.
I can't remember the author, but it's a good book. Or it might be Painting with Words.
Either way, it sounds interesting. I'd be interested to know more about that. You know, like next, if you send me who the author is or something, because that just sounds like something that's in my right up my alley. Okay, so we've talked about procrastination. A couple ways we can avoid blocks. What about motivation? Can a creativity coach help you regain your motivation?
A good one can.
Yes, you're right, a good one can. Can self-coaching help you regain your motivation?
That's more difficult.
It is definitely more difficult. I've just been through a 2.5-week period where my motivation was gone. And it's very difficult to self-coach your way out of that, but it can happen. So, whenever your motivation is getting low, how do you get it back up? How do you get it going?
You read something wonderful by somebody else. You watch something wonderful, something thought-provoking, something different. But usually, for me, it's to read something. Emily Dickinson said once that she knows she had a great poem. When she read it, it felt like her head blew off. Not quite blew off. I think it was something a little more beautiful than that. And so
I understand what you're saying, though.
yeah.
I think I read that same quote. by
Yeah,
her.
and so when you go to these people that, when you read their stuff, it makes you feel that way. And then you feel like, maybe I could do that too, or something, or maybe it will, sink into me. But you just have a pile of books on your desk.
And a kind of antithesis of that is to read something horrible.
Read something horrible.
Because if I read something wonderful, I get more discouraged.
Because you kind of compare yourself.
Exactly. I compare myself to what I just read. And even though it's uplifting and it improves my mood, it does not improve my motivation. So I have a couple books that I've kept just for the sole purpose of reading something horrible. And one of them is a historical romance set in Scotland, and I wanted to like it so bad. I wanted to like this book, and the woman who wrote it was from Oklahoma. Have you ever heard a book called A Wall Banger? It's when the book is so bad you throw it against the wall. Well, this book has hit the wall about 5 times. So that's one of, and I always think I can write better than that. I know I can write better than that. Well, since we moved over a year ago, I can't find that book. So.
We have a collection of things that have been published. You can go and buy this book at the bookstore or online and stuff, and it has just horrendously stupid, idiotic things in it, like loading the clip into a revolver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, revolvers don't have
Also, if you
Yeah.
have some sort of success, even, in just in everyday life, it's this way too, that if you're having trouble stumbling with something, if you can have just a little bit of success with something, it's like, oh, I can do that. And it would be the same